Tens of thousands joined July 1st rally despite the strong wind signal number 3. Lun Cheng-ying says political reform consultation at an appropriate time. And Japanese right-wing activists confronted by Chinese vessels near the Diaoyus.
Good evening. Today marked the 16th anniversary of Hong Kong's return to Chinese rule. There were celebrations and protests amid inclement weather. Chief Executive Lun Cheng-ying promised to consult the public on the implementation of universal suffrage in the 2017 election at an appropriate time. Meanwhile, tens of thousands of people joined a protest march from Victoria Park to Central this afternoon while the strong wind signal number 3 was in effect. We begin our coverage with Rani Samtani, who was at today's rally.
The sky opened up as soon as the marchers began to make their way out of Victoria Park just after 2:30. A sea of umbrellas punctuated by the occasional banner moved through Causeway Bay, then to Wan Chai and onto Central. The themes of today's march: the people decide, universal suffrage now, and Occupy Central. There are also calls for Chief Executive Lun Cheng-ying to step down.
The organizers, Civil Human Rights Front, reminded marchers to stick to the police-approved route before they set off from here at Victoria Park. They were a little concerned that some people may cause disruption and get carried away with what they're demanding from the government.
I'm very disappointed with the performance of our CEO.
Because I think I should spread my opinion towards the government this day.
Well, the reason that we are here is to want a real democracy, so that everybody in Hong Kong will have a one person, one vote, and the election process should not.
Some called for a stop to development of the Northern New Territories, while others wanted improvement in the garbage recycling program. Actors and actresses joined a group of gay rights advocates. This woman, who was with a group calling for universal pension, believes that this is the only answer to alleviating poverty among the elderly. Among the marchers were Next Media boss Jimmy Lai, along with former Democratic Party chairman Martin Lee. Former Civil Service Secretary Joseph Wong joined the July 1st rally for the first time. He said he is there partly because the government has not responded to people's call for universal suffrage. All was well until they reached the junction of Hennessy Road and East Point Road in Causeway Bay. A group of people carrying the colonial flag of Hong Kong wanted to break through some metal barriers set up by the police. There was a lot of pushing and shoving because they wanted to divert from the approved route. Police said people wanting to join the march as it progressed through Causeway Bay caused traffic congestion on the road. They were told to join at the starting point in Victoria Park instead, and the crowd was upset. Some complained that they weren't allowed to cross the road where they normally can and accused the police of deliberately making life difficult for them. Organizers were angry that the police did not open up more traffic lanes to them despite the swelling crowd. Chief Secretary for Administration Carrie Lam said the government respects people's rights to express their opinion. She promised to listen to their demands and consider them when formulating policies in the future. Executive Council convener Lam Woon Kwong said the government should not focus on the number of people taking part in today's march, but on the reasons behind their grievances. Rani Samtani, TVB News.
Now, Joao da Silva is standing by on Chater Road in Central, where many of the marchers are still gathered. Joao, what are people doing there?
Good evening. People here have been watching performances by artists to support their cause. They've also been listening to speeches by Occupy Central organizers who have been dominating the gathering.
Their leader, Dr. Benny Tai, said the government is in a crisis to which the only solution is universal suffrage. Meanwhile, organizers have announced that they'll be cutting short the event, which is now expected to be over by 9 o'clock. That's all from me. Back to you in the studio.
Now, earlier today, Chief Executive Leung Chun-ying said the government will launch a public consultation on universal suffrage at an appropriate time. Speaking at a reception marking the 16th anniversary of Hong Kong's return to Chinese rule, Leung said he hopes to reach a consensus in time for the 2017 election. Etienne Lamy-Smith reports.
Official celebrations of the 16th anniversary of the handover began with a flag-raising ceremony at Golden Bohemia Square in Wan Chai this morning. Chief Executive Leung Chun-ying and his wife, senior officials, diplomats and other dignitaries were in attendance. Among them, former CE Tung Chee-hwa, who's now vice chairman of the Chinese People's Political Consultative Conference. But another former chief executive, Donald Tsang, was notably absent. Spirits were high at the ceremony, which also featured a helicopter flypast and a fireboat spraying water in Victoria Harbour. Despite the tropical cyclone warning, spectators also gathered there to enjoy the ceremony. Today also marked 1 year since Leung Chun-ying was sworn in as chief executive. Speaking at a reception after the flag-raising ceremony, he said the government will launch a public consultation on political reform at an appropriate time. He said implementing universal suffrage in the 2017 chief executive election is one of the key tasks of his administration. He called on the people to put aside their differences and work together to reach a consensus. Saying housing remains the main issue of public concern, the CE pledged to increase land supply. He also promised to work towards improvements regarding some long-standing livelihood issues, such as an aging society, poverty, and the environment. Etienne Lamy-Smith, TVB News.
There were also a number of events to celebrate the handover anniversary, but some of them were cut short because of the rainy weather. Rachel Leung has that story.
Chief Executive Leung Chun-ying kicked off official celebrations at Tamar this afternoon, along with the director of the central government's liaison office, Zhang Shaoming. Apart from the songs and dance, spectators, many of them elderly or were from the mainland, were given free hats and t-shirts. This mainlander said he's here to celebrate Hong Kong's anniversary. The Hong Kong Celebrations Association, which staged the event, estimated that 225,000 people attended handover festivities around town. The head of the association, Zhang Yutong, said they were offering an alternative way to spend the day other than joining the anti-government rally. A concert at the Old Kai Tak Airport runway went ahead despite the storm. But then it was a bit of a washout. It was the same story over at the Cultural Center in Tsim Sha Tsui, where the pro-government group Voice of Loving Hong Kong held a carnival.
Voice of Loving Hong Kong originally planned for the participants to sit on the steps while they enjoyed the show, but instead they're all hiding under the canopy because of the rain.
The group also plans to launch a campaign which they say will counter the Occupy Central movement next year. Rachel Leung, TVB News.
The strong wind signal number 3 has been in effect since 1:15 this afternoon. The observatory expects severe tropical storm Rumbia to be closest to Hong Kong overnight. At 7 p.m., Rumbia was about 390 kilometers southwest of Hong Kong. Storm is forecast to move northwest or west-northwest at about 25 kilometers per hour towards western Guangdong and Hainan Island. The observatory says it's unlikely to raise signal number 8 unless Rumbia deviates significantly from its current track.
On the present forecast track, Rumbia is expected to be closest to Hong Kong overnight tonight, passing more than 300 kilometers southwest of Hong Kong. unless Rumbia takes a more northerly track. Otherwise, the chance of signal number 8 is not high.
Members of Japanese right-wing groups today went fishing in waters near the disputed Diaoyu Islands in a show of sovereignty. They were confronted by Chinese marine surveillance vessels carrying out regular patrols in the area. According to Xinhua News Agency, the Chinese vessels collected evidence on the Japanese ships and took law enforcement measures. Beijing and Tokyo are at loggerheads over sovereignty of the islands, known also as the Senkakus in Japan.
A published report that the U.S. bugged and hacked its allies, the European Union, is the latest leak by intelligence whistleblower Edward Snowden. Not only did the European Union express outrage, many of its 28 member states are demanding answers.
German magazine Der Spiegel reported that the NSA bugged EU offices and gained access to EU internal computer networks. It also disclosed that each month, U.S. Secret Service taps 500 million phone calls, emails, and text messages in Germany, similar to the data it taps in China or Iraq. The irony is, negotiations of a free trade agreement between the European Union and the United States is about to begin. This is no way to treat a trusted ally, says the EU Parliament President.
I'm shocked in case that it is true. I feel treated as a European and representative of a European institution like the representative of an enemy. Is this the basis for a constructive relationship on the basis of mutual trust? I think no.
Equally shocked was Japan, who reacted to a similar report in the Guardian newspaper. Japan's Chief Cabinet Secretary Yoshihide Suga says Japan will call the U.S. for an immediate explanation. This latest Snowden bomb triggered only a short response from the U.S. government that it collects intelligence just like every other nation. As Snowden begins his second week of hiding in Moscow, with a canceled U.S. passport, his plan for seeking asylum in Ecuador is going nowhere fast. Ecuadorian President Rafael Correa maintains Snowden's fate lies in the hands of Russian authorities.
There is no end in sight to the political standoff in Egypt after millions of people took to the streets across the country yesterday in a massive show of force against President Mohamed Morsi. At least 10 people were killed during the protests. Some demonstrators have now vowed to continue their campaign until Morsi steps down. Tony Sabine has more.
This was how millions of Egyptians marked the one-year anniversary of Mohamed Morsi's coming to power. More than 200,000 gathered at Tahrir Square in Cairo, demanding the resignation of the Islamist president.
We should understand that people are angry. We cannot spend another year, similar year, with the same ways of dealing with our problems.
Another opposition leader, Mohamed El Baradei, took part in the rally as well. Those who are angry with Morsi also made their presence felt outside the presidential palace. Another target by anti-Morsi protesters, the Muslim Brotherhood headquarters in the capital. A number of people were killed when Morsi's opponents pelted the compound with petrol bombs and rocks and exchanged gunfire with the president's supporters. There are now reports protesters later stormed and ransacked the premises. Back at Tahrir Square, the rally continued well into the evening. Some protesters spent the night in tents pitched in the square and near the presidential palace. God willing, with the demonstration and the sit-in by the people, we will force Morsi and the Muslim Brotherhood out of power, this protester said. Many say they would stay put until the president resigns. There were similar scenes in Alexandria and several cities in the Nile Delta as protesters vented their anger at the Islamist leader. Now, with the political stalemate not expected to end anytime soon, all eyes are now on the army's stance. Opposition forces hope the military would throw its weight behind them, tipping the balance against Morsi. Tony Sabine, TVB News.
And still ahead in our newscast, 1 dead and 37 injured in a 3-vehicle collision in Lantau. Arizona wildfire kills 19 firefighters. And Brazil wins the Confederations Cup.
Welcome back. A bus driver died and 37 people were injured in a collision involving a bus and 2 other vehicles this morning in northern Lantau. Jenny Lam has more details.
The double-decker bus was ripped open in the accident. Some of the tires flew off, and what was the upper deck left exposed to the elements with seats precariously hanging off the edge. Shocked passengers, among them parents holding onto their children, waited for medical help. The crash occurred on the airport-bound carriageway of the North Lantau Highway at around 1 p.m. A lorry first collided with a van, and then a city bus double-decker behind crashed into the wreckage. A police spokesman said there were long skid marks on the road surface, and they are investigating whether any of the drivers was speeding. City Bus said the driver began his shift at around 8 a.m. and the accident happened on his second run of the day. Jenny Lam, TVB News.
Tragedy in the U.S. state of Arizona. 19 firefighters were killed while battling a wildfire there. It is the deadliest incident involving firefighters in the U.S. in decades. The victims were trying to protect themselves from the flames under fire-resistant shields when they were overtaken by the out-of-control blaze. Flames raced through dry brush and grass in central Arizona, destroying scores of homes and forcing the evacuation of 2 towns. U.S. President Barack Obama, who's on a visit to Africa, issued a statement hailing the fallen firefighters as heroes.
To South Africa, where U.S. President Barack Obama toured Robben Island to pay tribute to ex-inmate and former President Nelson Mandela, who's now critically ill in hospital. Obama stood in the same prison cell where Mandela was held for nearly 20 years. While signing the prison's guest book, Obama said Mandela's struggle against apartheid paved the way for freedom and opportunity beyond South Africa's borders. Obama then met with retired Anglican Archbishop of Cape Town, Desmond Tutu. The American leader announced a $7 billion initiative to help double the access to electric power on a continent where only 1 in 3 people have electricity. Obama left today for Tanzania. Australian Prime Minister Kevin Rudd has unveiled his cabinet. It includes 11 women. That is widely seen as a move to counter a backlash from female voters after Rudd ousted his predecessor, Julia Gillard, last week. Rudd rewarded supporters in his new ministry. Among them, former Industry Minister Kim Carr, who's back as Minister for Innovation and Higher Education. And former Defense Minister Joelle Fitzgibbon was named Agriculture Chief. Rudd rejected suggestions the appointments were political and said all of his ministers were chosen on merit. And according to a new poll, the ruling Labour Party's popularity has climbed since last week's political drama. The opposition Liberal Party still enjoys a lead, but the gap has narrowed. Chris, over to you for a look at today.
After the excitement of the opening day of the Tour de France, which saw a bus block the finish line and a massive crash, the second stage went more or less to plan. Riders had to negotiate 154 kilometers on the French island of Corsica. Jan Bacalon of Belgium took the stage and the leader's yellow jersey. He is 1 second ahead of Britain's David Miller. The Tour stays on Corsica for the third stage later today before heading to the French mainland.
And finally, the government has named 337 people in this year's honors list. Among them, rescue workers who acted bravely during the Lamma Island boat disaster last October. Jenny Lam reports.
There are 4 recipients of the highest honor of Grand Bauhinia Medal in recognition of their services to the community. Among them, 2 judges of the Court of Final Appeal, Patrick Chan and Sir Anthony Mason. The other 2 Grand Bauhinia Medal recipients are the 94-year-old president of the Hong Kong Buddhist Association, the Most Venerable Kok Kwong, and Maria Tam, cited for her contributions to the drafting, implementation and promotion of the Basic Law.
9 people will receive the Gold Bauhinia Star. They include Professor Nelson Chow from the Department of Social Work at the University of Hong Kong, former Executive Council member Marjorie Yang, George Ng, chairman of the Sai Kung District Council, former Court of Final Appeal Judge Sir Gerard Brennan, and legislator Abraham Shek, who nominated Henry Tang during last year's chief executive election. 23 people will get the Silver Bauhinia Star, including Stanley Wong of the Urban Renewal Authority, drama actor, director and performing art educator Chung King Fai, legislator Priscilla Leung, Ambrose Ho, chairman of the Broadcasting Authority, Tik Chi Yuen, a social worker and Democratic Party member who voiced his support for national education last year, and also star cyclist Wong Kam Po. 56 people will be awarded the Bronze Bauhinia Star. They include Federation of Trade Unions member Wong Kwok Heng, music conductor Yip Wing Si, Chinese Estates Holdings Vice Chairman Lau Ming-wai, who was a member of Henry Tang's election campaign last year. 61 people who showed bravery during last October's boat disaster near Lama Island will receive the Chief Executive's commendation for community service. The CE will give out the medals at a ceremony at Government House in October. Jenny Lam, TVB News.
And that's our news. Thanks for joining us.
Good night.